Of Broke and Out of Work will start at 8:10 tonight. So tune back in on Facebook Live or on Zoom. It's free. Great. So I see we're recording. And I just wanted to, can you make my screen bigger? Me?
I'm not sure.
Oh, there I am. Yeah, I just had to see. I just wanted to see one thing. Okay, great. Good. So let me just check. Great. And okay. Test.
Sounds good.
Yep. Test.
Sounds good.
Okay. And test.
Sounds good.
Okay, good. And let me just check on this thing here. Good. And you heard those?
I hear it.
Okay, good. And that's good the way it is. And also up here. Okay, good. You heard those?
I heard those.
Okay, great. Okay, good. And I see we're recording. Okay, terrific. So tune back in at 8:10. And Joe, I'll check in with you just a little bit before 8.
Around 8 o'clock. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Hey, Joe.
Hey there.
All right. I just want to do a quick last minute sound test
Okay.
and test.
Sounds good.
Okay. Test.
Sounds good.
All right. Test.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. Thank you. And let me just look at a couple more things. Test. Okay. Good. And one more thing. Test. Okay. Okay, good. All right. So great. So thank you for joining us. We'll begin in a few minutes and welcome to Broke and Out of Work. And you're here. Yay. Okay, Joe, I'll see you in a bit. Thanks.
Great.
Hi, I'm John Fisher, and this is Broke and Out of Work. Now, as you'll notice, there's like this really downward angle on me right now. I'm using this, the camera's set up high and shooting down on me. And it's because this is from a time in my life where I felt very small. I felt very little, very tiny. And so I kind of want the camera to capture that throughout, that I felt kind of diminished. And not because of anything objectively was happening. It was more like things going on inside of me, things that I should have taken more responsibility for. But whatever the reason, I was smaller. I felt tiny. So in order to set myself up for all this defeat later, I'm gonna have to do a lot of bragging at the beginning, but that's okay. I mean, bragging's harmless, right? So it's gonna sound very braggy, but don't worry, because soon I'll be diminished. So I was in graduate school for almost a decade. It was great. It was the best thing ever. I had no idea what a wonderful journey it would be because they paid me to do all sorts of stuff. You see, I used to put on plays at the school, right, with students in them, right? But they wouldn't pay me to do that. They would pay me, though, to teach. That was robbing from Peter to pay Paul, right? They pay me to teach and I direct plays. And then also they put me into the Townsend Center. Now, this was this very hoity-toity collection of scholars and intellectuals. I wasn't a scholar. I mean, I was like this artist person, this weird gay artist, so they just kind of put me in there to kind of mix things up. And I kind of acted like a scholar and said really witty things every once in a while. And they paid me to do this. And it was great. And that was the secret. That was the secret to my success. Because I put these plays on for free, basically, but I was being paid to teach and be in the Townsend Center. And then I'd move them into San Francisco where they make money. And that added up to enough money for me to live on, teaching Townsend and plays extended in San Francisco. I did the Joy Gay Sex, I did Medea the Musical, and they did great. And this is from a 2-year period in my life that started out with me doing this show. It was so much fun to do. It was called Combat. And it was actually a drama. It was called Combat, an American melodrama. And it was all about gays in the military during World War II. Now, this is during the time of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, right? That's what we were going through then. So I went back to World War II to show that there were gay heroes. And the play had done really well at UC Berkeley. And then we moved to the city and it did really well again. It was in this big theater. It ran for 3 months and it won a Glickman Award for Best Play. I was so excited. So after that, I was hired by Yerba Buena Gardens to direct an outdoor musical extravaganza called Titus. This was a musical version of Shakespeare's horrible tragedy, Titus Andronicus. And that was a big hit too. And then I was asked to go up to Santa Rosa to direct a production of my show, Medea the Musical, which had been a big hit in San Francisco. Now, it was a big hit in Santa Rosa. It got extended, but even better than that, some guys from LA saw it and they wanted to bring it to LA, to do it in LA. So then I was down in LA directing Medea the Musical. Now in LA, it's all about the LA Times. You got to get a good review from the LA Times. So we rehearsed the heck out of it and the show was a hit. It was a hit in Los Angeles and it ran and ran and ran. And I couldn't even stay down there for the whole production because I had to go back to Berkeley to direct a show called Partisans. Now, this was a very serious production because it was about Jewish resistance to the Holocaust. Now, of course, there are a lot of plays and movies about the concentration camps, of course, but this was about Jews who fought back. And all of the critics had come from San Francisco to see this production on campus, and it got great reviews. I was so proud of it. So now I kind of felt like I've been doing a lot of shows that were like socially relevant and challenging for the audience, historical things, showing aspects of life that people didn't know about, Jewish resistance to the Holocaust, gays in the military. So I wanted to do just something fun and naughty. So I went to Theater Rhinoceros and directed Barebacking. And if you don't know what barebacking is, I'm not going to tell you, okay, because it's just naughty and it's not something talked about in polite society. Now, this production had one of my favorite actors of all time in it, Charles Boyle. He was so naughty in this show. I love Charles. And there was a ton of nudity in this show. I mean, I was famous for all my nudity. I mean, not me. I wasn't naked. I mean, people who should be naked were naked on stage. I got some, presentable people. So this show was really naughty and the audience loved it and it ran and ran and ran. And then I went back to UC Berkeley to direct Cleopatra the Musical. So this was sort of a follow-up to Medea the Musical, which was a big hit. Now I was going to do Cleopatra the Musical, and I was really nervous because it was supposed to go into the city afterwards. It was going to transfer to the city, and hopefully there it would be extended and would make a bunch of money, right? But I was nervous because all of the San Francisco critics were going to come to Berkeley and see it. And I was terrified. And on opening night, they loved it. They wrote the best reviews of it. It was so exciting. I loved it. Songs and dances, and it was gay, 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 gay. And I was so proud of it. So now I could relax a little bit because we had these good San Francisco reviews for later when we moved it into the city. Before that, I had to go back to LA and direct another play I'd written a long time before, The Joy of Gay Sex. Now that has a really naughty sounding title, but it's not a naughty play. It's just like this romantic comedy with some songs. It's really very wholesome, really. It's gay wholesome, like goalsome, right? But I was nervous about it because, LA, you gotta get the LA Times. And also half the cast had done it in San Francisco. The other half had never done it at all. So we would have to rehearse them a lot, but they'd only have 2 weeks to rehearse. I was horrified. So we rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed day, night, afternoons. It was crazy. And in 2 weeks, the show, I thought, fingers crossed, was ready. So we had opening night. And there was a big crowd. I mean, the theater was sold out and the LA Times was there and the show started and the audience laughed and they clapped and everybody had a good time, but it wasn't like a crazy wild time. It was just like good. It went over. It was a success. But I was nervous. I was nervous about that review. Now, my husband came down to LA and he saw this show and he's the best. And he was going to take me on a vacation to Yosemite. And it'd been a while. I had not been on vacation in a while. So we went up to Yosemite. Now, here's the thing though. At 3 a.m. every morning, I left Yosemite Valley and drove an hour and a half to the nearest market to find the first copy of the LA Times. I was determined to see that review. I wanted to see how this show was going to do. So I drove an hour and a half out of the valley to this grocery store and I'd get the LA Times and I'd stand there in the parking lot of this grocery store and I'd open it and I'd turn to the entertainment section and I'd go to the theater section. Nothing. Okay, so then I drove back to the valley and then we went hiking and everything. And then the next morning I got up at 3 a.m. and drove an hour and a half out of the valley to get the LA Times to look for nothing. So one day we went into the valley to go hiking, right, to Vernal Falls, and we were passing the Ahwahnee Hotel. And I thought, oh my God, they probably have a copy of the LA Times in there, right? And so I walked into the Ahwahnee and there was a copy. And I picked it up and I paid for it. And I walked off into the lobby and I opened it. And I turned to the entertainment section. I turned to the theater section. There was a picture from the show right there. There was the cast in a big color picture. And I read the review. They loved it. They loved it. It was a love letter. It was great. It was a wonderful review. I was so excited. The show would be a hit. I mean, there was, they said that this person couldn't sing. That was the one insult. I was like, oh, that person sings beautifully. It's like crazy. What is the media thinking? But I was so happy the show was a success. The LA Times liked it. They'd sell tickets. Great. So we went on this wonderful hike all the way up to the top of the falls. It was incredible. What a wonderful day. And then I went back to San Francisco now to direct Cleopatra, the musical in the city. Now, the press rep told me that the reviewers were all going to come back and see it again in the city. Well, I didn't understand that. The cast was exactly the same. It even had the wonderful Charles Boyle in it. I love Charles Boyle. He was so naughty on stage. He was crazy. But I was like, why are they coming back to see it? They've already covered it. So then I got nervous again. So there were a couple of cast replacements, not big roles. And so we rehearsed for 6 weeks and the show was ready and it was back in this nice theater where Combat had played. And I didn't want to take any chances. So I told everybody, invite all your friends, invite comps, let's fill the theater so that everybody is sure to have a good time. I was worried about that, LA thing where, right? So I wanted the theater to be full and it was. On opening night, it was full. And I sat there, I was so nervous. I want the show to go well. I want it to go well. I want it to go well. And the curtain went up. And the audience had the best time. They laughed, they clapped. There was a standing ovation at the end. I was like, yeah, wonderful. The critics saw a show better than Berkeley. I was so happy. And me and my wonderful husband and our friend Kevin, we walked out of the theater and we walked up to the Castro and we went to this wonderful bar, which was all windows, and we had a bottle of champagne. It was great, a magical evening. And then on Monday morning, I did what all of us theater people used to do before there was the internet. I got up at 3 a.m. and I went out on the sidewalk to see the first reviews, right? And I walked down the sidewalk and there was the paper box. I put my quarter in, it thunked. I opened it, I took out the paper, I headed home, but I couldn't make it home. I was so excited. I stopped on the sidewalk and I opened up the newspaper and I turned the pages to the entertainment section. And there was a big picture from Cleopatra the musical. And I read the review. It was terrible. It was the worst review I'd ever read. We got slammed. It was atrocious. I couldn't believe it. What? Where did this review come from? And as the day went on, I got the other papers. They all hated it. They hated it. And these were the same people who had said it was great in Berkeley, and it was the same show, and they said it was terrible. They totally slammed the show. Horrible. I couldn't believe it. I was devastated. And none of them pointed out that the audience had a great time. I mean, none of them said, you know, like, well, I don't like it, but the audience had a great time. They just said it's awful, as if to say that everybody had a bad time. When really, they were the only people who had a bad time. It was incredible. You know, I often think about how awful our president was. I mean, our last president, really, Trump, terrible. And, you know, I've been through a lot of presidents. My first president, the first president I was aware of was Nixon. Awful. And I really think that all of my presidents have been bad, except for Barack Obama. Loved him. He got me everything, marriage, military, loved him. But otherwise, horrible. But Trump was worse than all of them put together. Terrible. And my friends used to come up to me and say, his economic policy, his domestic policy, his international policy, But then they'd say, and what is all this stuff about how the media lies? And on that one, I'm always like, well, I mean, if you're in theater, you've had the experience of like a boffo great opening with excitement in the audience, and then reading in the paper that the show was bad with not even an acknowledgement of what was going on in the audience. Don't get me wrong, Trump is terrible. He's terrible. But I was like, what? So the show wasn't going to be a hit. It wouldn't get extended. I wouldn't have any income. And this was a big problem. There were a number of problems now because there was to be no income from the show. And also, I was suddenly out of a job. I was no longer a graduate student. You see, nobody had noticed for a decade that I've been a graduate student, right? I mean, you're supposed to be a graduate student for 4 years. I had stayed for 9. I've been there 9 years, but nobody noticed until this year. The new chair of the department noticed. He noticed and he said, out, get out. That is it. You are done. No Townsend Center, no teaching, no productions, nothing. Out, out, out. He said, you're not even a student right now, out. And he cut me off after 9 years. He was the first person who noticed that I'd been around forever. I would have stayed there forever for my whole life, but he out. And this had other implications. He also said, you know, if you want a PhD, you better write a dissertation by the end of this school year. Otherwise, you're out and you don't even get a doctorate. You get nothing. Out, 10 years wasted. Oh my God. And on top of that, without any income, guess what? When you're no longer a student, you have to pay student loans. Now, I hadn't taken out a student loan in 8 years. I'd completely forgotten about it. I took out student loans my first year because I was worried about money. But then after that, I was always getting teaching, Townsend, university fellow, all this great stuff. And I was making money off the show, so I didn't need to take out loans. But I had these old loans. And when they cut me off and I was no longer a student, guess what? The loans had to be paid. And I was freaking out because I had no income. I was broke and out of work. What was I going to do? Okay, well, immediately I had the fees, just the director playwright fee from Cleopatra the musical. It wasn't much, but it was a little bit. I also had this Schwab account, right? Now this was supposed to like take care of me the rest of my life. And it was great. It was like this big investment account. And every month I got a dividend, which was like a couple $100. That wasn't going to cover me. So I started to sell off my Schwab account, my stocks. And I was like, oh my God, my daddy told me, he said, don't ever dip into principal. That's principal. That's your foundation. That's your nest egg. Don't dip into it. I was dipping into my principal. I was burning down the house. It was horrible. Now I had to get a job because I didn't know how long my Schwab account was going to last. Now here's the thing. Teaching is complicated because everybody wants to teach in the Bay Area. Everybody in the world wants to teach in the Bay Area. So as soon as you have a job, you're back into a very competitive market. So I told all of my friend teachers, I said, I'm looking for a job. And they all said, well, this is not the time to be looking for a job because the school year is starting. But okay, we'll keep you in mind, but there's nothing. I then wrote a letter and put my resume into the letter and sent it to every university and college in the greater Bay Area, as far south as Monterey, as far north as Santa Rosa, from the Pacific Ocean all the way to Dublin, Pleasanton, and out there. I wrote to all of them. And then I did follow-up phone calls to see if there was anything. Now you can ask for teaching jobs. That's understood. You can ask for them. You cannot ask for creative positions, not in the theater, because the minute you ask, people realize you're desperate. You can't show your desperation because they don't want you if you're desperate. And I already had this horrible review in the paper. Listen, you're only as good in theater as your last review. And my last review was horrible. So I couldn't call people up and ask for work because they'd be like, oh, well, of course he needs work. He's desperate. So what could I do? All I could do was network. And networking in theater means going to opening nights. So I would go to an opening night and see a show and hang around afterwards and say, oh, that was great. That was wonderful. I tell the director, the artistic director, the playwright, boy, that was wonderful. That was great. I can't ask for work, but I can just be a face that's enthusiastic and happy. And I go to another opening night. Oh, that was great. That was wonderful. Huh, it's so nice to meet you. Yeah, what a great theater you have here. Oh, that was wonderful. Wow. What a wonderful theater complex this is. Yeah. You can't say I'd love to work here. You just be enthusiastic. And then you hope that when they're sitting around making decisions about the coming season, they'll be like, oh, that guy. Oh, yeah, that guy. Yeah, maybe we should bring him into it. That's what you hope. Well, the networking continued and it got more and more desperate. I would do anything. You know that expression, that guy will go to the opening of an envelope? That was me. I go to the opening of anything, trying to get my face out there. And then I really screwed up. An acquaintance of mine who I'd known for a long time, not well, but I'd known him a long time. His husband died of AIDS. And somehow I got invited to the funeral and the memorial. I don't know how. I mean, they must have sent out invitations to this huge mailing list. And I actually went to a funeral to network. Not to say anything necessarily, just to be a face there because I knew a lot of theater people would be there. And I went to the memorial afterwards just to be a face there for no other reason than networking. And my acquaintance came up to me and he actually said, did you know my husband, Paul? Did you actually know him? I said, no, well, we met once. Yeah. He said, oh, thanks for coming. And 10 minutes later, he read a eulogy to his dead husband and he was weeping. And I thought, what are you doing here? This is not right. Not only that, but it wasn't even working. The networking wasn't, I was making mistakes and nothing was working. And with time now to just get a job. I didn't want to go on welfare or general assistance or food stamps. I don't know. Again, my daddy, you don't do these things. But I had to pay my bills and I had to pay my debt. So I had to get a job. Now, the last job I'd had outside of teaching and directing and writing and being in the Townsend Center was a long time before I'd gone into graduate school. I worked in bookstores. Well, bookstores would not pay enough. They paid minimum wage in San Francisco. That would not be enough. So what would I do? Well, I love books. I love to be around books. So I talked to my husband, Michael, about it. And he works at the San Francisco Public Library. And he said, well, you could get a job as a bookshelver. And that's actually a civil service job. And it actually pays really well. I thought, well, okay, I'll apply to be a bookshelfer. I'll be around books. That's great. I love it. I love it. So I got on my bike and I went down to the main branch of the San Francisco Public Library. And I filled out an application to be a bookshelver. And they took the application. They said, great, this is good. And I said, so what do I do now? And they said, well, nothing. If a position becomes available, we'll send your application to the branch or to the head of the department that needs a bookshelver. And then if they're interested, they'll contact you. So I said, what do I do now? They said, well, nothing, you just wait. I said, okay. But I thought, waiting's for losers. That's for people who don't want to close. I'm a closer. What am I going to do? Okay, I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put on a sweater and go to every single branch library. So I got out one of my cutest sweaters. It was a Christmas present. And I was determined to visit every library. I typed up my resume. And I got on my bike. There are 30 branch libraries in the San Francisco Public Library system, and I was going to go to all of them. So what I do is I get to the library, I go in, I'd ask to speak to the head librarian, and I'd say, here's my resume. I'm really interested in being a bookshelver in your library. And I always got the same reaction. It was, well, you know, that's not how it's done. You have to go to the main library, fill out an application, and then when we need somebody, they'll send us your application. I said, oh yeah, I understand that, but I've done that already, so I'm in the system. I just want you to know that if a position becomes available, this is my favorite branch, and I'd really like to work for you. And I got some really interesting reactions. Some people were like this, oh, okay, whatever. Other people were like, oh, well, thank you. And some people were like, okay, let's give you an interview. And I would get a full interview. I would sit down at a desk with a librarian and they would interview me for an hour, telling me about this library, about their children, asking me about what I was up to. It was fascinating because I was something new in the day. They thought that was kind of cool, right? You know, this guy visiting during the day. So I would do that all day long. Now I could only visit 3 or 4 of these libraries a day because of hills and they were so far apart. And then at night they were closed, so I couldn't go to them. So what to do? Because I really had to find a job. So I decided, okay, enough. I'll just take a bookstore job. I'll just do a bookstore. It's fine. It's fine. Somehow I'll make it work. But the bookstores weren't hiring. The jobs were all taken. Nobody was hiring in the bookstores. So then I thought, okay, what else do I like? Videos. I'll go to every video store. The video stores weren't hiring either. Nobody was hiring. So I went to my local video store and this mortified me because I've been going in there for years, checking out videos. And now here I am, hat in hand, asking for a job. I don't know, something about knowing them. I just felt so humiliated, but I went in and I said, are you hiring? And the guy was so sweet. He said, you know, this store is just me and my brother and our friend. We're never going to hire. But I'll tell you something. Yeah. If you really want a job, Trader Joe's is always hiring, minimum wage. I thought, Trader Joe's? I'm not interested in food. I mean, I like to eat food, but I'm not, you know, food's not my thing. I mean, Trader Joe's is cold. They heat it for the food, right? Not for the people. And I thought, oh my God, I'd be working for minimum wage at Trader Joe's surrounded by foods. And I'd have to learn all these different kind of, you know, fruits and vegetables and canned meats and things. I thought, oh, okay. If I have to. So meanwhile, during the day, I continued my journey to all of the San Francisco public libraries, all the branches. And finally, one day, I got to the 30th. And when I got home that night, after I got into all of the libraries, there was a phone message for me. It was from the 4th library that I've been to. They wanted me to come in for an interview. The public library had a position. I'd done it. I was so proud of myself. So I thought, okay, I can't just go back in with a sweater because they already kind of did me like a little interview before. So I thought I'm going to put on a tie. My daddy always said, wear a tie. He taught me how to tie everything, a bow tie, a necktie, everything. Yeah, this tie is pre-tied. for speed, right? But I do know how to tie a tie. I once saw Rex Harrison tie a tie on stage while he was singing a song, and he didn't have a mirror. It was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. I guess that's why he's Rex Harrison. They paid him the big bucks, because he could actually sing a song and tie a tie on stage. So I put on a jacket. I thought, okay, good. This is dressed for an interview. I am ready. And I got on my bike and I rode to that library. And when I got there, I bounced in. I said, hi, I'm here for the interview. I've met before. Now, the woman was very nice. Her name was Annie, and she'd actually interviewed me before, but this was the official interview, right? So she took my application and she had the resume that I dropped off, and she took me into a little room and she conducted a formal interview. And she said to me, she said, so as a bookshelver, how much independence do you think you should demonstrate? I don't think a bookshelver should demonstrate any independence. I think a bookshelver should only do what a supervisor directs a bookshelver to do. And if they have any questions, they should ask the supervisor. She liked that answer. Then she said, if you saw another employee doing something wrong, which of these would you do? A, tell the employee to stop. B, ignore it. C, alert a supervisor. Oh, that's easy. Alert a supervisor immediately. Yeah, the faster the better. She liked that answer. Then she said, so which of these do you think is an appropriate amount of time to be late every day? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 15 minutes? You should never be late. You should be early. You should be early so you can change and be ready to work. She liked that answer. Then she said, how often do you think it's okay to come to work drunk or high? Oh, you should never come to work drunk or high. You should never come to work drunk or hungover or high or ragged out. Ragged out is like being hungover. It's the equivalent of being hungover for being high. I don't know that from experience. I've just read about it. I'm a playwright. I do a lot of research. So you should never be any of those things: drunk, hungover, high, or ragged out. She liked that answer. And she said, we're going to hire you. I had it. I done it. I had the job. So the next day I had to go down to the main library for orientation and a lot more paperwork. Now, I was down there for a 2-hour orientation and a ton of paperwork. I was like, why? Well, I found out why, because I was becoming a civil servant. And once you're a civil servant, you are never not a civil servant. This was the first day of the rest of my life. In their eyes, I would be a civil servant the rest of my life. So they had to do a lot of, paperwork and orientation and all that stuff. I was in, and I would start soon. The problem was it was only a part-time job, and I still had to find another job to go with it. So I thought, I'm doing really well. I'm doing really well. I should try other libraries. So I got on my bike and I rode around to other libraries with my resume. I went to the Mechanics Institute Library, a really cute library downtown. They weren't hiring. So I rode up this steep hill to the University of San Francisco. They weren't hiring. They only hired students. So I went down that hill and up another steep hill to UCSF because they had a medical school, and the medical school had a huge library. When I got there, I got off my bike and I went right in. I said, are you hiring bookshelvers? And the woman at the desk said, I think so. You should talk to Richard. He's the guy in charge of bookshelvers. So I went and I talked to Richard, and Richard said, oh, yeah, I'm hiring. What kind of experience do you have shelving books? Well, I didn't really answer the question. I said, well, I'm a bookshelver at the San Francisco Public Library. He said, yeah, good. You are hired. So I had it. I done it. I had 2 jobs. I had income. I'd soon have money coming in. He said, you will start tomorrow. So here is a typical day in my life as a bookshelver. I would get up at 6 a.m. I'd have breakfast with my husband, Michael, and then I'd get on my bike. I'd run up the hill to the UCSF Medical School. I'd get off my bike. I'd shelve books at UC Med from 8 to noon. Then I'd have my lunch. Then I'd get back on my bike. And I'd coast down the hill to the public library. Then I'd get off my bike and shelve books at the public library from 1 to 5. Then I'd get back on my bike. And I'd ride home. I'd have dinner with Michael, my husband. He's a wonderful cook. And then I'd stay up late doing my dissertation. I'd work late into the night typing my dissertation because I was determined to finish it. I didn't think the chair of the department thought I could finish it. I think he was hoping I'd fail, but I knew I could do it. I knew I could do it. Now, the SF Public Library had a lot of rules. There were just a ton of rules. First of all, every 45 minutes, I was expected to sort and shelve an entire cartload of books. Now, it was like this big, right? Like that, right? And it had 6 shelves, 3 on each side. And I would have to sort all the books and then take them out into the public area and shelve them. And there were a lot of other rules. There was no talking on the job. That was considered time theft from the institution. There was no sitting on the job. There was no reading on the job, more time theft. And there were snitches. There were people who would snitch on you if they saw you doing anything or thought they saw you. And one day, Annie said to me, John, come here. John, somebody saw you looking at a book. There's no reading. Well, that was impossible because I only had 45 minutes to shelve all these books. But Annie anticipated my answer. She said, Robert can shelve a full cartload of books in 30 minutes. Well, I couldn't say anything to that. So I said, oh, okay, Annie, I'll work on it. Thanks. It was interesting though, because even though I couldn't read the books, I had to read the call numbers. And I did some interesting anthropological observations. You see, the library was divided into nonfiction and fiction. And 95% of the books that I shelved were nonfiction. And then I shelved a lot of DVDs and cassette tapes and audio tapes. And I also shelved a lot of other little things that we had that were people would check out, but I only shelved books in the fiction section 5% of the time. In other words, we had this huge fiction section. It had everything in it. Jane Austen, Trollope, Dickens, George Eliot, Toni Morrison, Richard Wright, everything. But nobody read these books. Nobody. Only 5% of my shelving was these books. And the only fiction books that anybody ever checked out were genre, like Western, science fiction, mysteries. It was so weird. And I couldn't figure it out. It's like, what is this interest in nonfiction? Well, the fiction books had a lot more pictures. People like pictures. Also, high school students would check them out to write reports. Really? What about the internet? A myth. A lot of high school students were still using the books to write reports. So interesting. Now, at UCSF, we had only one type of book, and that was medical journals. 4 floors of medical journals, right? The New England Journal of Medicine, the Lancet, the Harvard Medical Review, the UCSF Medical Journal. That's all anybody worked on at UCSF. They just checked these books out, or they didn't even check them out. They just took them off the shelf, huge carts of them, the patrons, the medical students. They'd push them in the copy room. They'd make copies of the articles they needed, and then they'd leave them. And then I would push them back and put them back on the shelf. And it had to move fast because people were always looking for the same books. And the library was huge. It was absolutely gigantic. The public library wasn't. It felt very crowded. I mean, it was pretty big, but there were a lot of employees and a lot of patrons, so it felt kind of crowded. And there was a very definite hierarchy, okay? So at the top were the librarians. They were like God, right? And then below them were like the supervisor techs. That's what they were called. And they were sort of in charge of making sure that everything happened, scheduling and stuff. And then at the bottom were the bookshelvers. So that was the hierarchy, but I immediately threw all that off. I caused complete confusion because on the second day, one of the librarians said, oh, I know you. Yeah, I saw your play. That was great. That was really funny. Did you see his play? And one of the other librarians said, oh yeah, I saw that play. Wow, you're working here. That's great. Wow, how fun. And I was like, yay, I'm a celebrity. And I've been so nervous about this. I had so much anxiety about re-entering the workforce because I was terrified that I'd be seen by somebody and they'd be like, what the hell are you doing? What happened? You were like doing great. What are you doing here? But that's how it happened. They loved me. You see, I read this article by this actor I really liked, Alec Mappa, and he was on Broadway as M. Butterfly in this great play. And 6 months after the play closed, he was working at Pasta Pomodoro in Los Angeles as a waiter. And these totally bitchy actors came in and they were like, oh my God, what happened to you? You're waiting? I mean, of course, how successful were they? They were eating at a chain pasta restaurant. But anyway, I lived in terror that somebody I knew, somebody in the theater would be like, oh my God, he's shelving books, awful. But here I was, the celebrity bookshelver. Unfortunately, I wasn't a celebrity to everybody because there were three types of librarians. There were librarians who'd see my plays. There were librarians who hadn't, but said, oh, wow, I'd love to see one of your plays. The next time you're doing something, tell me, I want to come see it. And then there was a third type of librarian. And they were like, librarians don't talk to bookshelvers. Worse than that, Annie, my supervisor, she was completely confused because she was not accustomed to librarians talking to a bookshelver, and the librarians rarely ever talked to her. So suddenly there was tension, and something happened. Because when I went in the next week, nobody talked to me. Like they had like decided, well, who's gonna, you can't, what you get you, what you did, yeah, nobody. Silence, complete silence, because I disrupted the hierarchy and nobody was gonna talk to me. Now at UCSF, there was like no hierarchy. I never saw anybody. I never saw my bosses. I never saw anybody. You know, it was like magic. I just did my job and hustled through it. And, you know, nobody was like looking over my shoulder. I really didn't know who was in charge. There was this guy I worked with. He was great. His name was Steve. And the only thing weird about him was he had the exact same name as the critic who had trashed my play. I was like, that's weird. But, you know, I got over that. I stopped thinking about his last name. And Steve was a bookshelver. He'd been there for a few years. And in the mornings, he got up really early and he drove this school bus and he took all the kids to school. Then he parked the bus illegally in Golden Gate Park. Then he walked up the hill, shelved books for 4 hours, went down the hill, got in the bus, picked up the kids, took them home, and then he went home himself. And he was fun. And we talked about books we were reading and his girlfriend, Monica, and how they were going to get married. It was fun. And we like passed each other and we had this like ongoing conversation as we worked. It was copacetic. The patrons at UCSF were really interesting because they never even noticed us. They were medical students and they were just focused and all they wanted was their books. And the only time they ever noticed us is like if I accidentally took their books away too early, they're like, where are my books? And I had to like get the book. They were just like, we were non-entities. At the public library, the patrons could be very bossy. They were always coming up to me and asking me questions. And they saw that I worked there because I was shelving books. And they come up and they ask me questions. Well, I wasn't allowed to answer the questions. Even though I spent my whole life in libraries, I wasn't allowed to respond. I mean, if they asked, where's the trash can or where's the exit, I could answer that. But I wasn't supposed to answer any question that had to do with books or any of the materials. I was supposed to say, you need to talk to a librarian because that was their job. But that sounded so rude. I mean, these people were like, they wanted service. So I would say, oh, well, let's go see a librarian and ask them. And I would walk them to the librarian. Well, Annie hated that. She was always like eagle-eyeing me, you know, and she hated that. She hated me like walking patrons to the librarians. Well, the librarians were helpful. They were very helpful, but they would only help to a certain extent. They talk for at most 5 minutes to the patrons and then they'd say, well, I've answered your question. Now you have to, you know, help yourself. And the patrons would get offended. Like, you're not going to help me? Like they'd help them with the computers, but only to a certain extent. And I couldn't figure out, I mean, the patrons got so huffy and the librarians never adjusted their behavior and I wasn't allowed to talk. It was very strange. And then one day I was working at the desk, checking out books. And this woman checked out a huge stack of books. So I checked her books out and I handed them to her. I said, thank you. And she said, well, don't I get a bag? I said, oh, yeah, of course. And I looked around and there were no bags. So I turned to the woman I was working with. I said, where are the bags? And she said, well, we don't really give out bags. This isn't a store, but just this once you can have a bag. And she opened up this drawer that was full of these like filthy recycled bags. And she handed me one. She said, you can give this to the customer. And I was like, okay. And she said customer kind of sarcastically. And I like put the books and I said, there you go, have a nice day. And the person I was working with instructed me in future to say, well, we don't give out bags. This isn't a store, but we'll give you one just this once. And then, but I was like, but that makes me feel like I'm not helping them. And that makes them feel like they're not getting service. I mean, can't we get some bags that say FSFPL on it, like with a cute logo and everything? No, we're not a store. And that's when I realized that a lot of the patrons didn't have a lot of money. And for them, this was like their Macy's experience. They wanted to go in and have a Macy's experience. They wanted people to help them. But the librarians were like, no, this isn't a store, it's a library. So there was like all this tension about we're not salespeople and you're not customers and I want service. And it was like weird and it was making me very anxious, but I'm too negative. I can't think about this stuff. I have to focus when I'm off of work on my dissertation. Every night I'm up late writing my dissertation. And my cat is right there. Our cat is the most beautiful cat. And he just sits there right beside my computer with his little face pointed right at me, lovingly. And I rub his little chest. His name's Gaite. You see, Michael and I, we love French, and Gaite means sunshine. And that's what he is. He brought sunshine into our lives. It's so cute. And if I'm not paying enough attention to him, he rolls over on his back and I rub his tummy. And if he wants more attention, he actually goes off onto the keys and rolls his back on the keys, purring. And all this gibberish appears on the screen, probably a lot more interesting than what I'm writing. And I rub his tummy and he's adorable. Writing my dissertation actually becomes a fun thing for me and I'm really banging out the pages, but it's driving me crazy, this library. It's like, there's no talking, nobody talks to each other. And there's all this patron, library tension. And I feel like somebody's always spying on me. And it's like frustrating. So the medical school library actually becomes my haven. That becomes my guiding light because these things don't really happen there until one day somebody snitches on me at the medical school library. I went up to the 5th floor one day for my break. And in the library, they had this beautiful kind of half room. There's books on one side, and then the other half, there's these incredible windows with this panoramic view of the bay. You can see the bridge, and there's all these comfy chairs. And I sat there for 15 minutes reading my book. Well, my boss, Richard, came to me the next day and he said, were you reading yesterday when you should have been working? I said, what do you mean? Well, one of the librarians saw you up on the 5th floor and reported you. She said that you were reading when you're supposed to be working. I said, no, that was my break. That was my 15-minute break. And he goes, oh, okay, that's fine. I thought, wow, a snitch. This person snitched. They said, why didn't she come up to me and say, are you supposed to be here? And I'd be, oh yeah, I'm on my break. And no, she took the opportunity to squeal me out. I'm like, that is weird. Fortunately, at the medical school, I have friends. There's Steve, who I told you about. There's also Deborah. Deborah's really cool. She's got like a ponytail down to here. And she and I eat lunch. After I get off, we go out by this huge Beniamino Buffano statue of this bear and its cubs. And we have lunch, and she complains about all these people I don't know who work at the library. And it's really funny. I really enjoy her company. But my favorite is another Steve 2. And Steve 2 is like 6 years old, and he's re-entering the job market because he just spent the last 5 years living with his mother in San Diego. And she was terminally ill, and she was dying the whole time. And Steve's a really good guy. I love talking to him. And he says, you don't want to live with somebody who's dying. The things they say to you, it's amazing what people say when they're dying. It's rough. And she passed, and he was very sad, but it meant that he was free. And he moved back to San Francisco, where he always loved to be. And he re-entered the job market, and he's really trying to make it in the library, and he's going to library school. He's got this weird ambition, though. The first $8,000 he earns beyond what he needs to pay for things, and that's going to take forever on what we get paid, but the first $8,000 he earns, he's going to get a facelift. He says, yeah, I want to re-enter the sex field. I want to get out there and start meeting more men, right? I need to have a facelift. I'm like, Steve, you don't need to have a facelift. He said, yeah, I do. And it suddenly occurs to me, though, that's a little weird, but I don't even know if he's going to do it. And anyway, but what occurs to me is that he's gay. He's the first gay person I've met in this whole journey back into the work world. I mean, I'm in the middle of San Francisco at 2 different libraries and nobody is gay. What's going on? Except Stephen. Thank goodness for him. My goodness. So it's weird. I mean, all these frustrations I'm feeling, I think, come from one thing. I didn't anticipate what a shift this would be. All I could see was that I had to make money. And when you're a director and a playwright and a teacher, you're a leader. You're responsible. From the first day of class, from the first rehearsal to the last day of class or to closing night, you are in charge and you're leading people and making them feel better about what they're doing and encouraging them and giving them feedback and guiding them. When you're a bookshelver, you're just shelving books. And when you're not shelving books, the best thing to be is quiet. Say nothing. I didn't realize what a big shift it would be, but it is. And here's the thing. I mean, I'm making my nut. I'm doing very well. I'm paying my bills. I'm paying down my debt, right? I'm writing my dissertation. It's good. It's good. I'm doing well. I haven't gone on to food stamps. I haven't asked for general assistance. I'm doing really well. The bad thing is, I feel like a failure. I feel like I'm washed out in theater. I have no creative outlet, none. I hate to say it, but it's so demeaning. But I'm doing menial work. And I can't shine. Nobody's going to give me an award for shelving books or even say you're doing a really good job. People just don't do that. It's tough. And worst of all is I'm not being a very good husband. I'm grumpy around the house. I'm staying up too late at night. I'm not sleeping enough. I'm not enjoying the work enough. And I'm becoming a sourpuss around the house. And the thing is not sustainable. It's not sustainable. I can't do that. I'm working 7 days a week. And of course, when you work 7 days a week, it makes it sound like on the 8th day you rest, but no, you just go into another week. So that means you're working 30, 31 days a month, 90 days a season, 365 days a year. It's just stretching out in front of me and I have no creative outlet. It's wearing me down. It's wearing on my soul. There's a great book by a woman named Barbara Ehrenreich. She wrote this book, Nickel and Dimed, and she talks about this, the impossibility of feeling good in these low-wage jobs in America. And she, she's a New York Times journalist, but she actually goes out into America and takes jobs for a month and does things like work at Walmart and become a maid. And she works for this company and they require her as a maid to scrub the floors on her hands and knees. So she actually gets down on her hands and knees like this and scrubs the floors with her butt pointing up in the air. And she's convinced that the reason they do that is because the homeowners like it. They like to see the maids diminished. And she says it's impossible to make it in this country because of rents. You have to live in certain areas to get these jobs, these service jobs, but the rents are so high that you can never make enough money. In other words, you're working full time, but you're below the poverty level. She says it is impossible. Well, a student was assigned her book. His name is Adam Shepard, and he wrote a book called Scratch Beginning. And at the beginning of the book, he says, Barbara Ehrenreich is a whiner. She's just a whiner. You need to go out and get a job. And to prove that, when he got out of college, he went out and he got jobs and he lived in shelters. And he said, my goal was to end up with a furnished apartment, a running car, and $2,500 in the bank at the end of a year. And he succeeded. And he said, Barbara Ehrenreich is a whiner. And that's what's wrong with America, whining. But he didn't have a family. He had no ailments. He was 21. It seems unfair, his assessment. And then I realized that I think both these books are condescending to their subjects. They're condescending to this whole world. They're saying that all these people are trying. These are noble people. These are hardworking people. Some of them whine. Those are the bad people. No, the whining's good, but all of it is condescension. And I feel like that's what I'm doing. I'm condescending to my day, to everything. And I'm like, no, I've got to figure this out. I've got to figure what's going to make me happier at these jobs. Okay, good. Let me figure it out. Okay, no more condescension. I'm going to figure it out. Okay. So at the public library, I want to talk to people. I feel like I need to talk to people. And if I'm not shelving books, if I'm actually in a place where it's okay to talk, I will try to talk to people. So the first person I decided to talk to is Annie's assistant. He is also a supervisor. His name is Dow. And one of the librarians sort of mentioned to me that he played volleyball. So I was sitting at a desk with him, checking out books. And in between checking out books, I turned to him and I said, I hear you play volleyball. Do you play at Marina Green? I go down there all the time on my bike. And he looks at me and he goes, yeah. I said, oh, that's great. Wow. I see those people down there. It's like, those are like serious volleyball players. What was that? He points at this pile of cards and he waves his finger. And I realize that the pile of cards are not in order and he wants me to stop talking and put them in order. And that is the end of the only conversation I tried to have with him. I'm like, oh man, come on. All right, so I'm not gonna let that defeat me. So another day I'm working with another supervisor and his name is Dante. And we're both sitting at the desk and I check out some books. And I turn to him and I say, so Dante, I live in San Francisco. Do you live in San Francisco? And he says, no, I live in Vallejo. I'm like, wow. I said, wow, how long does it take you to get to work? He said, 2 hours. It turns out that he commutes 2 hours to his job and his wife commutes 2 hours to a Kentucky Fried Chicken job, a service job in San Leandro. They spend 4 hours going back and forth to Vallejo. I'm like, that's fascinating. Do you take the buses or do you take the ferry boat? I take the ferry boat. Wow, that's so interesting. Hey, listen, I'm like an actor and a playwright and a director, and I like to go see movies and stuff. Do you like to go see movies? And he's like, no, I don't see a lot of movies. Oh, well, what do you like to do? He said, well, I like to throw karaoke parties. Really? Yeah. So on the weekends, he has karaoke parties. This is amazing. This guy is so mild-mannered. I would never think he had karaoke parties. So I say, well, who's your favorite singer? Neil Diamond. Neil Diamond's great. Do you sing that song? Oh my God, I can't remember it. And so we start like humming Neil Diamond songs, and it's great. I have a friend, and I don't think anybody had ever talked to him before. It was great. So then also working at the same desk in the children's room is this librarian named Catherine, and I've heard that she went to UC Berkeley, right? So one day I say, hey, Catherine, I went to UC Berkeley. Somebody told me you went there. She said, yeah, I did. What'd you study? English, medieval English. She said medieval, which means she's not just answering questions. I say, oh, really? What's the first book you read in medieval English? Piers Plowshare. I've heard about this book. So I go upstairs, I get a copy off of the fiction wall where nobody reads anything. And that night I read Piers Plowshare. What a weird book. And the next day we have this whole discussion about Piers Plowshare. And she says she's going to get married for the first time. She's 65 and she's going to marry another librarian and they're going to go on a honeymoon. They're going to go on a honeymoon to Alaska on a cruise. It's amazing. I have another friend. And of course, Annie hates this. Annie's always like giving me the eagle eye. She sees me every time I'm talking to somebody. She's like, you're not supposed to be talking to that person. That person's a librarian. That's a supervisor. You're not supposed to talk. And she's always like, give me the evil eye. But I just do it anyway. It makes me feel so much better being at work. So now I decide, okay, time to grow up. At the medical school, I need to make an effort there too. So there's that woman who snitched me out. And I've been walking into the medical school library and like staring at her, right, for months. I thought, boy, that's really mature. So one day I walk in, I say, hi, I never introduced myself. I'm John. She shakes my hand. She says, I'm Maria. Oh, I live in San Francisco. Do you live here? Mm-hmm. Oh, I like to go to movies. Do you like to go to movies? She goes, no. When I go to movies, bratty young people kick the back of my chair. I hate it. I say, oh, I do that too. I kick the back of people's chairs all the time just to be nasty. And she smiles. I say, so how do you get your movie fix? She says, well, I watch these awful movies on TV, and it's gotten to such that I love watching awful movies. I was like, I do that too. I watch awful movies. Yeah, that's cool. And we have a whole discussion about watching awful movies on TV. And I've got another friend, and she never snitched on me again. So it's good. I mean, it's good. I mean, and it makes me happier. And I'm being a better guy at home. I'm back to my usual friendly husband stuff, which is what it's all about, right? And the cat and I are getting along with writing the dissertation, and work is getting better. It's getting better. It's definitely better. It's an improvement, right? It's good. It's good. And the work continues on my dissertation. And I've been working in these libraries and writing the dissertation for 6 months, 8 months. And then I submit the dissertation, and everybody on my committee says, you're done. It's finished. Good work. All 4 of my faculty members sign off on it. And I've got 2 weeks before graduation, but I've got to get all of their signatures on the signature sheet. So I say to them, well, when next you're on campus, can I bring it over and you'll sign it? And most of them say, well, I don't really go to the campus that much. But why don't you mail it to me and I'll mail it back? I'm like, no way. Because if they forget, I'll never get the signatures. I said, okay, can I ride my bike up to your house and get your signature at your house? And they're like, oh, yeah, that'd be fine. Yeah, go ahead and do that. So I ride my bike to get 4 signatures. I take my bike over to the East Bay and I ride to the top of the Kensington Hill. I get 1 signature. Another day, I go back to the East Bay on BART with my bike, and I ride my bike to the top of the Berkeley Hill. I get another signature. Another day, I go back with my bike on BART, and I ride my bike again to the top of the Kensington Hill to another professor's house. I get my 3rd signature, and then I take my bike out to Walnut Creek. No hills, thank God, but it's sweltering hot. And I ride my bike to a community center to get the 4th signature. This professor was directing a play at the community center, and I stumble in covered with sweat, and I hand it to him. He's like, wow, good work. And he signs it, and I've got all 4 signatures. So I stumble back to BART, and I get up on the BART platform, and a cop says, you're not supposed to have bikes on BART at this time. I'm giving you a ticket. I'm like, no, please, 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 don't do that, please, please. I just gave my dissertation signatures. It's complicated. Please don't do it. He said, okay, I'll make it a warning. But if it happens again, you're going to have to pay double the fine. Got it? I'm like, yeah, thank you. And I've got all my signatures. I'm so proud of myself. Every single signature. So now I can go to graduation. Now, fortunately, graduation is on a day when I'm working at UC Medical Center, not the public library, because Annie would be like, no. She would never allow me to take the day off. But they let me take the day off at the Med Center. And I get the big gown, I've got the square hat with the tassel, and I'm going to graduate. I'm actually going to get my doctorate. And I'm sitting up there on stage, and next to me is another theater professional. A woman who runs a theater, and she says, how you doing? I said, I'm good. She says, what are you working on? And I say, I've been working on my dissertation. I never tell anybody I'm shelving books. I've got this shame, this humiliating shame about my life. It's terrible. I'd say I've been working on my dissertation, but I've written a play. I'm just kind of trying to find a place to do it. Well, you can always do it at my theater. I'm networking again. I didn't even realize it. I'm networking. And I actually said I wanted to do something. And she said, you can do it at my theater. It's great. This has turned into the best day. And then the chair of the department gets up there. And I'm sure he's proud of me because he set me the challenge. He said, I'm cutting you off. I'm throwing you out. And if you want to get a dissertation, you've got 1 year to do it. And I'm sure he was like, this is going to get him to do it, And, he was tough love, right? But I'm sure he's proud of me. And I know he's going to say something really nice about me. And he gets up there and he says, well, we have a doctoral candidate today who is actually getting his doctorate. He's getting his PhD. And it was a long time coming. Did he just say that? I can't believe it. What a thing to say. And then he says my name, John Fisher. And I stand up and I get a standing ovation. Yeah, the audience is full of students I've worked with. undergraduates, and they give me a standing ovation. It was amazing. And my parents came, and all four of my professors came. Nobody gets all four of their dissertation advisors to come. And my lovely husband, Michael, is there. And he gets a picture of the standing ovation. Good guy. And I think this chair hates it. I think he hates that standing ovation. I think he's just steaming. But I'm like, great, yay, yay. And I wave. I'm totally undoctorate. Yay, 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 yay. And I go out in the lobby and I walk up to the chair and I'm like, hey, thanks a lot. He won't even shake my hand. He just nods at me. Boy, what a sourpuss. But it turns out to be a glorious day. And my mother wears this beautiful blue pantsuit outfit. My father's in his coat and tie, and all my dissertation advisors are there, and my wonderful husband, Michael. We go to a party afterwards up in the hills, and then we go to dinner with my folks. It's an incredible day. I did it. I did it. I'm paying my bills. I'm paying down my debt. And now I'm a PhD. And the next morning I get up, back on the bike, more bookshelving. I go up to UC Med. I coast down to the public. Shh. I head home to Michael. But here's the thing. Things are getting very weird at these libraries. Some strange stuff is coming down. First of all, there's this guy who comes in once a week. He actually works at another library, but he comes in as sort of a replacement at our library once a week. And his name is Abraham, and nobody talks to him. I mean, even by the standards of that place, nobody talks to him. And I sort of casually ask somebody, I mean, why does nobody talk to Abraham? And they say, well, he doesn't do anything. I said, but he's a supervisor. I mean, a lot of the supervisors don't really do anything, but they say he does nothing. And no one talks to him from the minute he arrives to the minute he leaves. And what's weird about it is he's the only Black person I've ever seen working at this library. I'm like, this is weird. Nobody talks to this guy. What does he think is going on? So I end up working with him, Abraham, and he seems like a sweet enough guy. And I can kind of tell he's like gay because of his hairdo. He has a very gay hairdo. And so I'm like, I'm going to talk to him. I mean, this is ridiculous. I say, hey, I'm John. Abraham. Wow. I live in San Francisco. Do you live in San Francisco? Yeah. Where? The Castro. Oh, nice neighborhood. What library do you usually work at? Park Branch. Park Branch? Wow, that's my library. I go in there all the time. Hey, great, Abraham. Well, I'll see you here. I'll see you at the Park Branch. Nice to meet you. And we have a whole conversation. And it's delightful. And of course, Annie hates it. She's like, I mean, because, you know, she's like, she hates that I'm talking to these people. She especially hates that I'm talking to Abraham. But I'm like, hey, he's here. He's a chum. Let's do it. Then I'm up at UC Med and I'm having lunch with Deborah and I'm telling a story. And she suddenly says, boy, you tell the same stories over and over again. You must think you have great stories. And I'm like, I do? I wasn't aware of that. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? Well, I hear from somebody else that she's mad at me because I've made friends with Maria, the snitch librarian. I'm like, oh my God, what is this, high school? Meanwhile, back at the public, Dante and I are big buddies. We always smile when we see each other. We talk about karaoke. He's from the Philippines. He tells me about the Philippines. We have hit it off. So one day he says to me, John, come here. You know what you should do? You should marry one of these librarians. Yeah, marry them. They're all single and they're rich. They make a ton of money and you'll have all that money. And I suddenly realized that I've never really come out of the closet at the public library. I've been like closeting myself and it's so depressing because everything I direct, everything I write is like gay, 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 gay. I'm like a gay activist. And yet at this job, I was so weirded out and didn't feel like I fit in and nobody knows I'm gay. And this just really bums me out. And still Annie is like, you know, like every one of these conversations, which are now kind of making me feel weird, is like, and then it all comes to a head one day. Annie's not even there, but I'm shelving books, my cart, and I'm
hustling to do it in 45 minutes. I got it down. I do it in about 37 minutes, but I'm having a tough time that day because I ate some bad food. That's the only food that's available around there. Barbara Ehrenreich writes about that, how the working class are only offered bad food. That's the only food that they can get. And so I had some lousy food and I'm feeling like I'm going to throw up. So I don't want to barf all over the library, but I'm not supposed to leave the floor when I'm working, but I got to get out of here because I'm about to vomit. So I run downstairs to the bathroom. There's only one bathroom and somebody's in it. Somehow I choke back the vomit. I run back upstairs. I shelve some more books and it's coming back. So I race down the stairs. The library, the bathroom is still locked. I race back up the stairs. I'm like almost dizzy with illness and I really have to throw up. So I run back down the stairs and the bathroom's open. I run in and I heave and I let it all come out. And I'm determined to finish it so I don't have to keep running back up and down the stairs because I'm not supposed to do that. So I spend a substantial amount of time in there. Also, I don't want to go home because if I go home, I'll just have to make up the time and I'm here, so I want to finish the day. So I take a mint, I put on my tongue and I'm back to work, all barfed out with a mint. And I get back up onto the floor and Dow is standing at my book cart. And I walk up to it and he says, John, we expect a book cart to be shelved in 45 minutes. And I just lose it. I mean, I just look at him and I say, oh, come on, man. That was a big mistake. Whoops. I go home. I come in the next day. Annie says, I go into the little office. I sit down. She's typed up the entire incident. She slides it across the desk. She asks me to read it. I read it. I say, I'm sorry. I was sick, but I couldn't get into the bathroom and I shouldn't have said that to Dow. I'm sorry. She then takes the paper, signs it, and pushes it back across to me. I smile at her. She says, you have to sign it. I said, what? You have to sign that. I'm like, why? Because we've discussed it and now you have to sign it. I'm like, I'm not going to sign it. She says, oh, you have to. You have to sign it. No, I'm not going to sign it. No, you have to sign it. Now, listen, I am an attorney's son. I don't sign things that I disagree with. I mean, this is like one person's account of what happened, and this is ridiculous. I'm not going to sign. I said, Annie, I'm not going to sign it. She says, you have to sign it. I said, well, I'm not going to. Outrageous. I think I've become the first person in the library's history not to sign my own death warrant. So everything changes. It is Weirdsville from then on because nobody knows how to deal with me. Here's the thing. I've passed my probation, so they can't just fire me, right? And they can't wait until my probation's up and get rid of me because I passed my probation. I am a civil servant for life. And I've not signed the document, and news spreads through that library like wildfire. And when I come in the next day, I thought very few people talk to me. Now nobody talks to me, like silence. Even people that I was striking up friendships. Catherine, the woman who got married, 65, she still talks to me. I think she is deaf or something, she didn't hear about it. The rest of it, it's silence because I broke the code. Outrageous. And I'm like, I don't sign things, sorry. And the only person who starts talking to me is a librarian named Donna. And she talks to me because she thinks I'm going to lead a revolution. She's almost egging me on to lead a revolution of bookshelvers. I'm like, I'm not trying to lead a revolution of bookshelvers. I got nauseous, I threw up. Dow got mad at me. I didn't sign something. That's all, it's over. So we go on. And there's detente. And Annie is still this, and giving me notes and feedback. And I'm like, yes, Annie, yes, Annie, yes, Annie, And I never get sick again. I never run down the stairs and barf again. And life goes on. The interesting thing is that I'm no longer writing my dissertation, so I can network some more. And a friend from LA who does a lot of plays, he does a play in San Francisco, and I go to the opening night of his play. And afterwards he comes out and I said, that was great. You were really funny. I really enjoyed that. And he doesn't care about San Francisco reviews. He probably hasn't even read them. And he casts me in his next show. And then some guys come from Arizona, new to San Francisco, and they hear about me, and they don't care about my review. They haven't heard about it. And they ask me to direct a show that they've written. And then this woman who runs an opera company, she doesn't care about the newspaper. She asked me to direct an opera. And suddenly I am working again. I've got jobs all over the place. It's great. And now when I'm done shelving books at the Public at 5, I get on my bike and I bike to rehearsal. And it's crazy. I'm biking more than I ever did. But this is great because this is inspirational biking because I'm working. Yay! And then an interesting thing happens because people ask me what I'm working on, and I say, I'm doing a play. Do you want to come? I'll give you a comp. So I start giving comps to people at the various libraries, and they come and see my plays. And it's great because my plays are all different. I mean, one of them is like super naughty. It's just like gay, 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 like super naughty. Another one's like gay light. And the third one, the opera, is just straight. And I find that, sometimes I'm inviting the wrong people to the wrong shows. Like that guy, Robert, who I thought had snitched on me. He hadn't snitched on me, but he wanted to come see the play. So I gave him a comp and he came and saw this really naughty gay play. And I could tell he was horrified. He thought that, we were all going to like grab him and do something to him. So I thought that was a mistake. But Stephen, the one who was going to get the facelift, re-entering the workforce, he loved the naughty play. He loved it. He was laughing. He said that was great. And he even loved the gay white play. He loves all of them. He just loves culture. And so people start coming to see my shows, and it kind of breaks the ice on all this I didn't sign the document stuff. And I never invite Annie, which I kind of feel bad about, but she never asks about the shows. All she had to do was ask about them. She never did. I kind of feel bad, Maybe I should have just signed it, but I didn't know what was going to happen. I thought maybe I'd be like, pummeled with books like those people in the Shirley Jackson story, The Lottery. Like, they throw books at me until I died. I wasn't sure. So things slowly change. And now that I'm done with school and I got my PhD, people start offering me jobs. I mean, this woman I wrote at UC Extension, she just got a letter from me. And she asked me to come in. She said, I saw your play, and she offers me a job teaching playwriting. And I looked at the letter and I'd misspelled her name. It was like the worst letter ever, but she hired me. And one of my dissertation advisors hires me to teach playwriting in the English department. And I keep getting more opera work. And my old boss, who was my supervisor for teaching at Berkeley, he gets me a job writing 2 totally gay musicals at Mills College. And suddenly, because I went through this really difficult period and somehow survived it, I've got work coming in. And one day when I've cashed a bunch of checks and I'm sure that the checks are good, I call up Annie and I say, I'm quitting the public library. And she doesn't even understand. Nobody had ever quit the public library before. I mean, they've quit jobs, but it's because they moved into higher paying jobs like librarian or supervisor. Nobody's quit the public library. She's like confused. I said, yeah, Monday's going to be my last day. She says, oh, well, we'll miss you. So I go down to the main, and it's almost like getting the job. It's like this big drama leaving the civil service, mostly because they don't understand it. And the woman in charge of the personnel office down there, she's like, you're quitting the civil service? Like, like telling me this is your last chance. Can I help you somehow? But I do it. And I hang on to my other job at UC Med because I actually like those people. And Deborah and I are friends again. And Steve Schaller's a bud. And a bad thing happens though. The other Steve, the one who drove the bus, one day I show up and I'm picking up books off of all the tables and putting them on carts. And he's like looking at me. And about half an hour of this happens. He keeps coming out of the copy room and I'm putting these books on carts. And finally he goes up to me and he says, look, our priority is the copy room. We have to clear out the copy room. That's our priority. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I help him clear out the copy room, but he's not my supervisor. And I get really pouty and I don't talk to him for a week. Well, that was childish. And then he leaves. I can't help but feel that, he decided this was kind of fun until that incident. And if he'd come up to me and said, "What the hell's your problem?" I would have said, "Well, what's your problem?" And we've had a big old hash out, then it would have been fine. But, well, we never talked about it. And I bet it had nothing to do with me. He was going to marry his girlfriend, Monica. Maybe that didn't work out. I don't know. Maybe something else. Maybe he just didn't want to work there anymore. Maybe he moved. I don't know. I never find out, but he just leaves. It kind of convinces me that I really don't fit in here anymore. And I'm hanging on to this job because I'm worried that all this other creative work is going to fall apart. And I get it down to 1 day a week. And my boss, Richard, says, "Well, why don't you just work 1 day a week?" And I said, "Well, I really should quit. This isn't, I really don't fit in." He says, "No, you're too good. You're good. I like you. Why don't you work 1 day a week?" And I do, just to hang on to the job. And then Richard quits. He retires. I had nothing to do with that. Nothing. That wasn't me. That wasn't me. No, he was like 67 and he retired. And we throw a little party for him. When the party's over, I'm like, well, I think I'm done with the book shelving. I now have my creative work. I now have my teaching. I've got enough. And it's back to being scary, living from review to review and hoping there'll be a teaching job. And when there isn't, finding another one. And it's back to sort of a scary life, but I think it's the life I was used to. Yeah. Nickel and dimed. It's tough out there, right? When you have bills, when you have debt. I was lucky. I'm not like these people in these books because I have rent control. And I have a loving husband and we split the expenses. And I've got an adorable cat and I don't have health issues and I don't have children. So that was my journey from 2000 to 2002. I wonder now during the pandemic about people. Kind of makes me verklempt, right? Thinking about all these people and how tough it is, not just physically, not just the repetitive shelving and moving stuff around, but just how it makes you feel. Maybe if we could all just sort of talk to each other as we raced about, we'd feel like we were all in it together. I think we are. It's like a play. You collaborate on something, you rehearse, and you become a family. That's what work should be. Thank you so much. I'm John Fisher. This has been Broke and Out of Work. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. We have an incredible play going on right now. It's called The Review, and it's playing this weekend, Friday, Saturday night at 8, and Sunday matinee at 1, and then you can stream it for the rest of Sunday. It's really a wonderful production. And we have a bunch of deals that we offer. There are tickets available on Gold Star. If you're a member, you can get a half-price ticket. And it's an incredible play about the art world and 4 amazing women and their interaction. And it's a real heartwarming, inspiring piece of theater. I encourage you to check it out. Coming up on Tuesday, we have the next in our reading series. Check that out at 7 o'clock. All the information is on our website. This is my 47th solo presentation. Thank you so much for supporting me in all this. It's great to have an audience. If you'd like to support Theater Rhinoceros in these difficult times, and they are pretty challenging for our little nonprofit, you can make a donation to our theater by sending a check to me, John Fisher, at my COVID-19 office, Theater Rhinoceros, 91 Central Avenue, number 102, San Francisco, California, 94117, or go on our website, therhino.org, therhino.org, and make a donation through PayPal. We'd certainly appreciate your support. But thanks most of all for being with me tonight on this journey through a time that made me feel very small, but I even found some bigness in the smallness and a bunch of incredible people who I will never forget, most of them heroes. Good night.